You're watching NewsX and I'm Rishabh Gulati. I had to take a step in the middle of a major event that we were holding a couple of days ago to start putting these in my pocket once again. Okay, this is what is now infamously the 3-ply surgical mask. Bought the N95s also. Sanitizer. I'm pretty sure all of you watching this broadcast, including all my guests, are exhausted, brain fried. That once again, we have suffered, we have mourned, we have struggled, we have somehow survived and gotten by. And you have a country to our north which is led by a despotic regime which spent the first few months of a serious pandemic lying and sabotaging the world, spent the next few months boasting about how they had it all under control. And now, when they are debilitated because of their flawed policies at a huge level, their country is still more populous than ours, they are lying to their teeth. It's frankly despicable. It is disgusting. I can imagine the frustration you're feeling because I'm certainly feeling it. Enough is bloody enough. But here we are, once again. And we have no clue because Tedros is still there, Xi Jinping is still there, Fauci is still there. All these chaps have faced nothing, no accountability. It's become so bad, ladies and gentlemen, that the Global Times, okay, which is the Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece for international English language propaganda, okay, is trying its best to paint a rosy picture, but they're sort of accepting that things are pretty effed up, okay. The country, the Chinese country, has stopped publishing COVID figures because up until yesterday they only had 3,900 cases. Not the 37 million, which are more likely what's actually happened. Now, you know, I was born in the mid-80s. My father was alive, and I think some of our guests would have been there around. I'm pretty sure Ambassador Vora must have graduated college in 71 or 72, because my father remembers him. He was in Stephens, and my father was a Hindu during that period of time. And my father's friends have campaigned you. I think you were Stephens College president or something, sir. So they were mentioning, they saw you with me on TV and they said that, you know, we campaigned for him in St. Stephen's. 71, ladies and gentlemen, was a time when there was a war with Pakistan. And if you turned on Pakistani radio, and my guests would bear with me, they used to run radio broadcasts of the great victories that they had won against India, of how many tanks they had destroyed and how many planes they had destroyed and how many people they had captured. So All India Radio started another program called Radio Jhootistan, okay. Now in a day of mass media, social media, you're watching Chinese Jhootistan taking place at this point of time. So I want to open up this conversation because I have no scientific way of addressing this. It is called impotent frustration and rage. The aphorism goes, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Well, here we are. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai is with us on the broadcast. Dr. PSV Rao is with us on the broadcast. Professor Madhav Nalapat is with us. And as I mentioned, Ambassador Vora is with us also. Ambassador Vora, how are we still here? Xi Jinping is stronger. Tedros is still there. Fauci is still there. Everybody who took zero accountability for the mess the first time around has faced no comeuppance. And you and I now need to go and procure our masks once again, because even though it's not a mandate right now, we all know it's now a concern.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gulati. It's always a privilege to be with you on the show, hosted by you on NewsX. You're an amazing channel and you are an outstanding anchor. I learned so much from you, from Dr. Bagai, from Person Nalapat, from Colonel Sodi, and of course from Dr. Rao. So thank you for referring to my college days. That was a million years ago. Radio Jhootistan you referred to, I was one of the first few who used to do the announcements. And Dr. Bagai, Professor Nalapat, just for a second, I wanted to say that we even announced on Radio Jhootistan that while Indian Army and the government of India was giving Veer Chakra, Mahavir Chakra, etc., the Pakistani Army was also giving awards, Rafu Chakra and Khan Chakra. They were giving to their people. So it became a bit of a joke at that time. Sir, you've talked about accountability, about the Faucis of the world and the Tussacks and the that stupid fellow who heads the Weird Health Organization. We live in an imperfect world. And it's going to be very, very difficult, sir, to hold them accountable. The international architecture, Mr. Gulati, millions of people watch your show. The international architecture, global governance created after the Second War is long past its expiry date. Whenever we talk of a new architecture, people get very upset. Let me just put it to you like this. What we are seeing about the virus today, the Chinese virus, their template is simple. And we understand this. People say, oh, they are unpredictable. They are not. They are predictably unpredictable. Evidence points to your guilt, obfuscate, try to confuse matter. If there are witnesses against you, suborn them, bribe them. If truth stares you, your people in the face, hide it. This is typical of the Chinese virus story. First, Ding Ling said no Chinese origins. Then he said, oh, it may have been discovered in Wuhan, but it was not created there. Then the Americans brought it to China during the military games. Then he said, Shri and Shrimati bat hanging upside down in their caves in Yunnan and doing whatever bats too had created it. Then it punished Australia for demanding an independent inquiry. Sir, I feel bad. In December 2022, as the Chinese virus sucks out the lifeblood of its innocent citizens, China stops publishing figures. Honestly, it is a bad dream. Ping Pong hopes that it'll go away when he wakes up. To the millions of people watching, I say happy Christmas, but to the people of China, it's not going to be a happy Christmas, sir.
Dr. Bagai, I mean, one has to ask ourselves the question, here we are, how is it that this has come to this pass?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So what China fails to understand is that lies has no feet. And I think that is globally recognized that they are serial liars. They're serial offenders. Their complete strategy has been unscientific, bizarre. And what we are seeing roll out in China now is a man-made catastrophe because of wrong policy decisions, very poor vaccines, very poor vaccine drive as a campaign in terms of percentage population vaccinated, sudden restrictions, comprehensive lockdowns, and then sudden removal of restrictions. No monoclonal antibodies, hospital infrastructure crumbling. There are no beds, no ICUs, no oxygen available in major cities. Forget the lower grade 2, grade 3 tier cities and towns. There's no blood available for blood transfusion. First, they changed the formula of calculating the case fatality. So they said all people who are dying only because of a COVID pneumonia. Now, even a blind man will know that COVID doesn't only affect the lungs. So they were trying to fudge that data to bring down the numbers. Now, when the numbers were escalating and going skyrocketing, they said no data at all. We are not going to publish anything at all. What these people have failed to understand that this is not a local outbreak or this is not their national health policy. This is a global pandemic. They have fooled the entire world once. And the fault is also ours at large that we got fooled. There was no inquiry and so on and so forth. We won't go into the past, but going forward, I think they have to be made accountable. All the organizations which were made after World War are redundant. They have failed to perform. They are irrelevant in the present time. And I think sooner people realize it.
So Dr. Bagai, I just want to look back at just the past few weeks. I'm not talking about ancient history. This is November.
Yeah.
The German Chancellor shows up in Beijing. Xi Jinping shows up for ASEAN. He poses for photographs. Joe Biden meets him for several hours. 2 days later, Kamala Harris meets him at a different venue in a different location. Now, once again, Xi Jinping knew exactly what was about to happen or had already started happening. Right? And yet he was happy to host the German delegation in Beijing in hiding it. You know, these things don't happen overnight. The build-up happens over a period of few weeks.
Yeah.
So this is again abject misrepresentation of the truth, which is the polite way of putting it. Yet, what are we doing about it? We've been fooled for the second time, right? I mean, any of those delegations could have carried back, fallen sick, gone worse. Anything could have happened. Now, I'm doing a conversation after this to have a discussion on at least Beijing we know something about from the social media leaks. What's happening in Tibet? What's happening in Xinjiang? Where they're probably happy that if half the population dies. So, we are still consorting, coveting, and hanging out with Xi Jinping. Why? Dr. Bagai.
Yeah, I think we need more global collaboration. We need solidarity. I'm convinced internally that I think India will take the front in taking China on. Most of the major corporates, multinationals, I know a lot of the medical equipment and manufacturing companies have already started moving out of China. I think military warfare is passé now. I think what will hurt China the maximum is when it comes down economically. Socially, they have no image, they have no standing at all. But I think the world needs to stand up for what is the truth.
Okay, so I just want to look back again, not ancient history. A couple of years ago, Dr. Rao will bear me out on this. Dr. Rao, you would recall, sir, that at the very beginning of the pandemic, just when we were observing things beginning off in India, there came a report from the Chinese media of a fantastic job that they had done in some 5,000 bed hospital that they built like literally in a few days. And it was a showcase of how this amazing country with its amazing centralized system could get things done quickly. Now here we are 2.5 years later. Xi Jinping has destroyed the Chinese economy. Now he's destroyed the health and well-being of the Chinese people. He is, one of his former presidents is now dead. We don't know what happened. The other one has been kicked out very publicly. And yet, he seems to be in total control. Now, what is the miasma? What is the brain fog in 1.4 billion Chinese people, including the millions of them, there are I think 50 million Chinese diaspora, that they don't see and are not able to smell the dead bodies?
Rishabh, good afternoon to you and to all the viewers. You remember from history how the Germans were subjugated, and same way many other in history we read about how a population is subjugated by an autocrat, and what they do now is also you would be aware that they have put up police stations in various nations, and these police stations have agents who will go and threaten any diaspora dissident. And even within the nation, you saw how they suppressed Hong Kong agitation, and they have a past of suppressing agitations. It is not by arresting the entire crowd. It is not by shooting down the entire crowd. It is by targeting the leaders or whoever is prominent in the protests and making an example of them. And you are seeing not only China, you are seeing some of the other nations also doing that, who are autocratic. So the whole population then goes into a sort of sense of helplessness, and it says, okay, there's no point, nothing is going to happen. And actually now you see much of the world also feeling helpless about China. So if the non-Chinese can start feeling helpless about what China is doing, obviously the Chinese people, you can't expect them to become very aggressive, and you've seen how the suppression occurs.
Okay.
Yesterday on NewsX, I mentioned a methodology which I can work only if everyone cooperates. That is, you declare China a containment zone, and all nations have to cooperate in that, in saying that there will be no trade, with China.
Dr. PSV Rao, you would well recall a lot of foreign publications, okay, accusing us, including Mr. Tedros, accusing the rest of the world of xenophobia, of racism. Okay, I remember there's one lady roaming around in Italy saying, "I'm Chinese, please hug me." Okay,
Yes.
I don't know what COVID guidelines of Dr. Fauci that meets. So the reality is that what you and I now have, and all the people that we've lost, this pandemic has now far outstripped those killed in the Nazi Holocaust.
Yes.
It is going to probably outstrip the total number of fatalities in the Second World War. I mean, if we are at officially 7 million, you can imagine 11, 12 million and counting at about
Maybe all wars.
Yeah, maybe, and maybe all wars. And I am having to mask up once again because of flawed Chinese policies. This is the only place where this is not over. Okay, so if it's not containment zone, here's a reality check. Let me get Professor Nalapat on this. Professor Nalapat, the Global Times, the very resounding, sound journalistic publication, now has a special section tracking coronavirus in China, sir. I don't know how much they've had to swallow, how many of their relatives have had to die before they've decided that, okay. So the coronavirus section of Global Times this morning says, the drug shortage to be gradually eased after producers start operating 24 hours. Pharmaceutical companies, ladies and gentlemen, are now operating 24/7 because of the drug shortage. That's a major admission. In Macau, you no longer have to do testing. And there's optimism, they say, about global recovery. Antigen kit suppliers is the third headline, is going up. Restaurants are returning with customers in Beijing, is what they're claiming. We all know what's happening there. So once they start confessing there's a problem, how serious is the problem actually, sir?
Well, the good news for Global Times is that not many people in China know English, so they won't be able to find out the kind of lies that Global Times is saying, except that the People's Daily will be reproducing the same thing. I would like to point out, Rishabh, that the problems in China started long before they unleashed the Wuhan virus on us in 2020. And that is caused by the reality of China replacing Russia as the new threat to global security. And as Dr. Bagai very correctly said, investments are coming back from China. Taiwan, Japan, United States, European Union, all of them invested in China. And now, quite frankly, those investments are becoming untenable. You already heard about Tesla shutting down its Shanghai plant. That is one of the largest plants for producing cars in the world. Forget about electric cars. It's been shut down. And hopefully, Tesla will understand that the best place to relocate that plant is in India. So this has been happening for some time. And I'd like to say it's been driven at high speed. This march towards, if I may say so, economic problems has been driven at high speed by Mr. Xi Jinping. You know, Sun Tzu said that you must bide your time. You must hide your strength. I don't think, Mao Zedong studied, Xi Jinping, studied Sun Tzu very, very carefully. He studied all the ancient Chinese scholars very, very carefully. But I don't think, Mr. Xi has, because then he would have not jumped into the fray and been so openly aggressive so early in the cycle of China trying to become a superpower that displaces the United States. And he's certainly not hiding his strength. You go on CGTN every day. You go on Chinese.
Okay. So Professor Nalapat. Okay. So now let's call the bluffs. The ability of the Chinese all-power encompassing dictatorship and the boast that they were making that they were best able to control a virus because the democracies would never be able to. Is that well and truly finished now?
I'd like to say that the answer is a resounding yes. And I'd also like to say that even the usual apologists for China, I'm surprised to see even Dr. Tedros being a little hesitant in frankly claiming that China has solved its COVID problem. This is one time when Tedros and the Global Times don't seem to be marching in lockstep. So
Surprising.
the answer to your question is absolutely.
So democracies have handled COVID much, much much better than the all-encompassing communist dictatorship in China, which practices socialism with Chinese characteristics. Let me get Dr. Bagai in for a second. Dr. Bagai, the Chinese vaccine, which was rolled out, utter failure.
Absolutely. Just before that, I was just reading on the net right now. Today's article in from the leading virologist, immunologist from Japan has quoted that China has stopped all genomic sequencing of all patients, whether hospitalized or not. So you will never get an answer henceforth from China. They have put a lid on everything. But with regards to Chinese vaccines, they were substandard to begin with. They had a very poor efficacy in all the initial randomized control trials, ranging between 30 and 50. And come Omicron and now the new sublineages, there is a 68 randomized control trial meta-analysis which has shown that the Chinese vaccine's efficacy has dipped down to 12, ranging up to 20. So it's not going to work.
Okay, so the Chinese vaccine, which they were, if you went to Dubai or lived, I have family in Dubai, or people in Dubai, all of them first shot was Sinovac, okay? So what it poisoned you with, or whether it's just a vial full of saline water, we don't know, which is what it seemed to be. Okay, so two things absolutely busted on. So let me now get Colonel Sodhi into this conversation. Colonel Sodhi, in terms of the ability of the Chinese Communist Party to govern its people, what is the performance we've seen in the past 2 years? Your assessment.
Jai Hind, Rishabh. It's my honor to be on a news channel and a privilege to be with the esteemed co-panelists. The fact that for a second time since the last quarter of 2019, China has stopped giving its daily COVID-19 figures to WHO shows this action is very deadly and dangerous because it once again puts the whole world at risk. Till date, we have lost about 7 million people due to this COVID-19 virus which emanated from Wuhan, China, and now they are doing the same thing. Rishabh, the most astonishing part is that the whole world knows that China is the origin of this deadly disease, but no country in the world can do anything. Not even the superpowers like USA, like Russia, no one. What more interesting, Rishabh, is that the Indians could not do anything. Our trade with China in 2021 was $125 billion, up 43.3% from 2020. And this year it is already up 34%. So the whole world is helpless in front of China because China has deep pockets. It is the famous saying that money makes the mayor go.
No, I disagree with the assumption that we are helpless. Okay, I think it's flawed to think that we're helpless. I think we can do things. I think are we not being able to do things is a separate question. So Colonel Sodhi, then let me rephrase my question. Has Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party offered effective governance better than his predecessors, whom he's probably disposed of very quietly, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, who were also communist dictators, but Xi is of course a species unique to himself. Has he offered better governance to the people of China?
The answer is an emphatic no. Because for all the achievements that Xi Jinping may berate and boast, the fact is he has killed millions of Chinese. We will never know the exact figures because that is how a curtain country like China is. But for his personal ambitions, his lust for power, if he's killed millions, I think that can be no worse ruler than China could have ever had.
Okay. Now, Professor Nalapat, in your assessment, whatever this wave is, eventually how many millions of people die, it will end. When it does end, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 4 months from now, 5 months from now, and there are consequences. What are the consequences for the Chinese political establishment, if any?
Rishabh, read the Sunday Garden editorial. This situation has shown the success of democracies vis-a-vis authoritarian dictatorships. China is an authoritarian state that went on telling the whole world authoritarianism is the way to solve problems. People are more prosperous. They are happier under authoritarian rule. They are healthier. They are safer. Well, India and China are proving that this is wrong. In India, the situation has gone to normal. Yes, we are taking precautions. Precautions are needed. But overall, life is normal. In China, it's completely abnormal. And that is the difference between democracy and dictatorship.
Ambassador Vora, now a few more blunt questions. When it now comes to interacting with China, because maybe Xi Jinping can intercede with Putin, it's a big economy, it's not going to go away. What is going to change after this new wave in which we've been lied to twice now for the second time? As I mentioned, the German Chancellor was in Beijing just a few weeks ago. He's just beaten the chaos in Beijing by literally days. What comeuppance this time around?
Mr. Gulati, I've heard very carefully what Professor Nalapat, Dr. Bagai and Colonel Sori have said. The movement has already started. May I remind you, sir, and I know this because I was there, in the United States, when we were really badly hurt last year by the Omicron, every American and his grandmother, and I attended some meetings, said, what more can we do for India? You recall that, sir. And in Dubai, Burj Khalifa was lit up with our colors, and the message was scrolling across, stay strong, India. Has even one country expressed sympathy for China? Sir, the movement away from China has started. We are trained to discover this. And we are seeing what is happening. The Goebbels times, whatever you call it, notwithstanding, we are seeing that there is an emotional distancing from China. No one has come out in support saying, sorry guys, we feel very bad for you.
No, but what is the brainwash, sir? I mean, even of the Chinese diaspora, okay? How do you sit there if you're living in New York or studying in Harvard because the Chinese government has sent you there to spy for them, okay? If you're doing this, how are you able to still say that after the economic collapse, the brutal suppression of the protests, of this total pandemonium of a pandemic which is now raging where everywhere else in the world it's manageable, how do you continue to justify the regime?
Because your families are there, sir. They've been told that their families will be victimized if they say anything against the regime. You know the story about the police station, you've talked about it. We all know what is happening there. It's a brutal, ruthless, heartless regime. A former Mongolian president who I know has met Xi Jinping 30 times. He said this guy can be charismatic, but at the same time, evil. And he concludes his article, he wrote it 2 years ago, Xi Jinping is pure evil. What more can I say, sir?
Dr. Rao, so what do we do? Here we are, okay? Hopefully it won't be so bad of it's the spillover. There will be a spillover, but hopefully it won't be so bad. So now what do we do so we're not back here another year later or 2 years later or 3 years later or 4 years later? Because I'm frankly sick of it. I'm sure anybody watching this broadcast is sick of this also.
Yes, I think we are far better prepared now than we were 3 years ago. And one, we have effective vaccines. Second, we have a system of vaccinating. Most of our population is already vaccinated. And either they are vaccinated or they have had a mild infection or a severe infection and survived. So there is good herd immunity. And if all our people can again get down to using masks and keeping away from crowds and social distancing, and we should be able to get over this wave and avoid another wave.
The inability 3 years later to produce an effective vaccine, the complete insanity in cooperating with other now more bona fide vaccines, including ours, and giving them to their own people. What does that reflect about these great doctors that Dr. Fauci was investing in providing funding to, including those in Wuhan?
See, the big difference between what the vaccines that China produced, both of them were inactivated virus vaccines. Now, when you inject any inactivated virus or a dead microbe into the body's scavenging mechanism just cleans it out. It doesn't react.
Okay, but Covaxin was the same and seems to have done better, sir.
Yes, that's what I'm coming to. See, in Covaxin, we had a far better adjuvant than they had. It is the adjuvant which stimulates the body's immune mechanism to react to that inactivated virus. And we have done that with polio and other viruses. and we had a far better adjuvant, and that is why our Covaxin has worked, where both the vaccines have not
But
worked.
my question was that these were
And-
supposed to be these amazing doctors, these geniuses, okay?
Yes.
That the US taxpayer was funding in Wuhan and other places, in these BS4 labs, okay? These amazing
Yes.
doctors.
Yes.
Where are all these amazing doctors now, sir?
Yeah, see, these people who are involved in it were basically had outsourced this whole program to China. They have to be, and because of this political divide in US between the two major parties, they have not, they have got scot-free till now. But if they are really serious, what the American
Dr. Rao,
government should do,
is it true, sir, to the
They
best of
should-
your knowledge,
Ah.
that the American medical establishment under the chain of command of Dr. Fauci took great pains to threaten doctors even in India not to write aggressively on the pandemic coming from Wuhan? To the best of your knowledge, is that correct, sir?
Yes, they did. They all got together and wrote a letter also. Plus, they spoke to our IIT doctors to suppress this. This was all happening in January, February, 3 years back. And eventually, slowly, various facts have come out. And hence, now they have had to backtrack and admit it. Now, the only way out is that the Senate should call Fauci and under oath get him to admit.
Well, he's not going to do it. Okay,
all
I'm short of time. I need to take a break. Dr. Bagai, okay. In terms of us now having a better understanding of these viruses, which all seem to be generated in China, and the funding that the US establishment, the US taxpayer, was providing to Wuhan, is all this over now?
Partly over, partly not. I think just to take a leaf off of the previous question, I think zero COVID policy, zero intellect, zero vaccine, zero ethics. That summarizes China. I think medically, as far as the intellect is concerned, they are in the dumps. But I think we need to be extremely careful. I think our investment nationally in terms of our budget needs to be a lot more on the newer vaccines. Now, internationally, there is a bivalent vaccine.
Yeah.
We have now coming up with an intranasal vaccine. That's a huge scope. And also a universal coronavirus vaccine. There may also be a possibility of a universal pan-viral vaccine. So many things have to be worked on. Many things are being worked on. More investment into virology and immunology. And I'm a very firm believer that India must have its own pandemic alert center.
Yeah.
We should not rely on data from Johns Hopkins and Mayo. Land is available, funds are there,
Yeah.
the best intellect is there. We should do what we think is
Okay.
correct only for India.
Okay, I think there are going to be plenty of opportunities. I'm going to come and pick on these ideas one by one with you as we have in the past, so that we can take our own pragmatic steps. But for gosh sake, there is a generation in this country who could not forget China for other reasons. Forgive or forget. I think that there is a generation now in this country who will not forgive and forget. I'm certainly one of them.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.